Okay, so like everyone's always talking about the latest superfoods or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then like you're trying to figure out if that stuff actually works, and then suddenly you're drowning in ads for all these supplements that promise you like, they'll cure everything.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's like a full-time job just trying to like sort through all this stuff about food and medicine.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to keep up with.
So that's why today we're going like super in depth with this.
Yeah, we're diving deep today.
This book you sent me, it's called
What You Must Know Before Taking Medicine.
Right.
It's by Wang Huipo.
This is like a crash course, basically.
Think of this as your shortcut to understanding the really important stuff about this whole world of food and medicine.
Exactly. And this isn't just some random person giving their opinions.
Yeah?
This is Wang Huipo. She is like a total expert in pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And she actually dedicated this book to Professor Chen Xiangshui from National Taiwan University.
Okay.
And he's like a really big deal. He won the Medical Contribution Award. Wow.
So we're dealing with some serious expertise here.
Very serious.
Today, we're on a mission to basically pull out the most important insights from this book.
Yes.
And we're going to focus on a few things, like how Taiwan, how we are with food and drugs.
Yeah.
And that blurry line between those two things.
Yeah, that could be really confusing.
And then all the crazy, complicated regulations that come with it.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Because honestly, trying to figure this all out on your own would be totally overwhelming.
Totally overwhelming.
But don't worry, we're here to break it all down for you.
Yeah, we'll make sense of it together.
All right, so let's start with what Wang Huipo says is the biggest problem.
Okay.
Which is this high consumption, low knowledge thing we've got going on, especially with all those food safety issues that keep happening in Taiwan.
Yeah, she points out this weird paradox.
Like Taiwan's healthcare system, It's amazing, right?
Yeah, it's one of the best in the world.
Top notch. But then The Lancet, they did this whole thing about public health levels.
Oh, and Taiwan's ranking wasn't so great.
Really?
Like more middle of the pack.
Wow.
And Wang Huipo thinks that's because we focus so much on treating illnesses after they happen.
Oh, interesting.
Instead of preventing them in the first place.
That.
Actually educating people about food and medicine,
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like we're awesome at putting out fires. But we're not so good at preventing them from starting.
Yeah.
And that brings us to all those food safety scandals.
Oh, right. Those just keep popping up, don't they?
It never ends.
So what does she say about that?
She's pretty straightforward about it.
Okay.
She basically says if the original ingredients are bad, if you're starting with stuff like animal feed or gutter oil, there's no way to make that safe for humans to eat.
Right.
No amount of processing or anything can magically change that.
So it's not even a matter of making a mistake. It's...
She sees it as fraud.
Wow. Yeah, that's a strong word.
She doesn't hold back.
I like that.
And she brings up something I hadn't really thought about before.
What's that?
Food safety testing.
Oh, yeah.
There are limitations to it.
Well, yeah, you can't test everything.
It's impossible.
Right.
They can only test for certain things in a sample.
Right.
There are tons of possible harmful things that could be in food.
Chemical stuff, biological things.
Yeah.
You can't possibly check for everything.
It would be way too expensive and just impossible.
Like trying to check every grain of sand on a beach.
Exactly.
It's just not feasible.
And she uses the example of melamine in milk powder.
Oh, right.
That wasn't even a standard test until that whole contamination thing happened.
Oh, wow. So they weren't even looking for it.
Nope. And it caused so many problems.
Yeah, that was a huge scandal.
And then there's the story she tells about the head of the FDA.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
It was during one of the big cooking oil scandals.
Okay.
And the director of the FDA, he said his family didn't even use cooking oil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she was not happy about that.
I can imagine.
It just shows how out of touch some people are.
Yeah, a total disconnect from what people are actually dealing with.
Exactly. And this leads into her idea of harmful presumption when it comes to food safety.
Okay.
That sounds interesting. Can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, so usually in legal stuff, it's innocent until proven guilty, right? But with food safety, she thinks it should be the opposite.
Oh, so guilty until proven innocent?
Kind of. Yeah, she calls it harmful presumption.
Okay.
So basically, if something is known to be harmful.
We know it's not supposed to be in our food.
Yeah, or if it's just obviously not meant for humans to eat.
Okay.
Then it should be assumed unsafe.
Unless the company can prove it's actually safe.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it puts the responsibility on the people making the food.
Instead of waiting for people to get sick.
Right. It's a much more preventative approach.
And she even mentions the Codex Alimentarius to support this idea.
Oh, right. That international group that sets food standards.
Yeah, so it's not just her personal opinion.
It's a globally recognized concept.
Exactly, and she doesn't stop at food either.
What else did she talk about?
Pharmaceuticals.
Oh, yeah.
She says those are even more complicated.
In what way?
Well, she says medicine is poison.
Wow. That's pretty intense.
Yeah, she wants to make sure people understand that taking medicine is not a joke.
Yeah, there are always risks.
Right. And if making sure food is safe is difficult, dealing with pharmaceuticals is like a whole other level.
I bet.
The book goes into a lot of detail about different aspects of using medicines.
Okay.
But her main point is that we have this high consumption, low knowledge problem.
Yeah, we take a lot of stuff, but we don't always know what we're taking.
Right. And she spent her whole career trying to change that.
It sounds like she was really passionate about this.
Oh, yeah. She was definitely not afraid to challenge the system. She saw herself as like a truth teller, you know?
Like she had this knowledge and she felt responsible for sharing it.
Exactly. Even if it meant going against the grain.
Even if it made people uncomfortable.
Yeah. And she did some pretty bold things while working at the Department of Health.
What kind of things?
Well, she gave out huge penalties to some big hospitals.
Well, wow.
And even revoked licenses from doctors who were performing unnecessary surgeries.
Oh, wow. That's serious.
Yeah, she called it betraying her class.
So she was willing to go against her own peers to do what she thought was right.
She was totally committed to her principles.
That's admirable.
And it's interesting that the person who recommended this book to us...
Yeah, the former Director General of the Department of Health.
Right. They actually go way back.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they both studied at the University of Michigan.
Oh, wow.
And they've both been fighting for public health for years.
So they've got this shared history of really caring about this stuff.
Exactly. And she also makes this really interesting point about the Chinese character for medicine.
Oh, yeah. What's that about?
In Chinese, there are actually two characters that can be translated as medicine.
Okay.
There's ha,
Yeah.
which is the more general term. And then there's in, which she interprets as medicine that emphasizes risk management.
Oh, interesting.
And evidence-based science.
So like being aware of the potential downsides.
Exactly. And she ties this back to the ancient concept of he.
Food and medicine having the same origin.
Right. And that's why she's critical of the fact that food and drugs are regulated separately in Taiwan.
Yeah, because our bodies don't actually treat them as separate things.
Right. It's all just stuff we're putting into our bodies.
And our bodies have to figure out what to do with it.
Exactly. And her background in drug development.
Yeah, she worked on creating new drugs for years.
Right. It really made her understand how important risk management is.
Because she saw firsthand how complex these things are.
She actually says invisible risks are the most dangerous because you don't even know they're there until it's too late.
Right.
And that leads to her big message, which is...
don't just take medicine if you don't need it.
Exactly. She sees both medicines and food as knowledge products. So you need the information.
The evidence-based science.
Yeah, to actually understand what you're consuming and how to do it safely.
It's about being informed.
Exactly. And she goes beyond individual responsibility, too.
Okay.
She talks about how we need better public policies and fair trade practices.
To create a safer environment for everyone.
Yeah, she's not just saying it's up to individuals to figure this all out.
It's a systemic issue.
Right. She thinks the government and the whole industry need to change.
That's a big task.
It is. But she's not afraid to call them out on it.
Yeah, she's not afraid to speak truth to power.
And she even questions whether the biotechnology and medical industries are putting profits before people.
That's a serious accusation.
Yeah, she's worried that they might be exploiting people for financial gain.
That's definitely something to think about.
And it sounds like even after retiring, she's still really worried about this stuff.
Yeah, she says she doesn't feel like there's true freedom from fear when it comes to food and drugs in Taiwan.
It's like this constant anxiety about what you're putting into your body.
And whether it's actually safe.
Right. And she even suggests that maybe we could use the NHI.
The National Health Insurance?
Yeah, to encourage better medical practices.
Oh, interesting. So like using the payment system to guide doctors?
Exactly. And she also talks about the importance of community as we get older.
Yeah, how we need to support each other.
And she ends this first part by saying, we need a total shift in our thinking.
Yeah.
She thinks we need to move away from this technology-first and product-centered approach.
So instead of just focusing on the latest gadgets or pills,
yeah,
We need to think about the human side of things.
Exactly. She wants us to be more critical.
To think about the ethics.
And to focus on developing scientists who actually care about people.
Scientists with humanistic values.
Exactly.
That's a powerful message.
All right, now in part 2,
Okay.
she gets into the whole distinguishing food from medicine thing.
Right, because that line can be really blurry.
Totally, and she starts with this story about miso soup and coffee.
Oh, yeah, what was that?
So she had this American colleague,
Okay.
and this colleague thought miso soup was like mud water.
How?
But they were totally fine with drinking coffee with all this creamer in it.
Huh. So it's just about what you're used to.
Yeah, it shows how different cultures have different ideas about what's considered food.
And what's considered normal to eat or drink.
And she uses this to talk about how in America,
Okay.
there's this big emphasis on knowing what you're putting into your body.
So like doing your research.
Yeah, and being informed.
Interesting.
But then she contrasts that with what she sees in Taiwan.
What's different here?
She says we have this herd mentality.
Oh, yeah, like following the crowd.
When it comes to health supplements and beauty products.
Okay.
Like something becomes trendy and everyone starts taking it.
Without really knowing what it is or if it even works.
Exactly. She says everyone has become a medicine jar without realizing it.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful image.
It's so true, though.
People just popping pills without a second thought.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are wondering
if those supplements actually work.
Yeah, like, do they actually do anything?
What does she say about that?
She's pretty skeptical.
Really?
She basically says that a balanced diet...
Eating healthy food?
Yeah, it should give you all the nutrients you need.
So you don't really need supplements?
She thinks a lot of them are just unnecessary.
And potentially harmful.
Right. They could put a strain on your liver and kidneys. And she doesn't think there's enough scientific evidence to back up a lot of the claims they make.
So it's not just that they might not work, it's that they might actually be bad for you.
Exactly. And she brings up some statistics to support this.
Okay.
Apparently, Taiwanese people spend a ridiculous amount of money on health supplements every year.
Really?
But only a tiny fraction of those products have actually gotten the official Little Green Man certification.
Oh, right. That means the government has actually approved them.
Yeah, so most of the stuff people are taking hasn't even been properly vetted.
That's scary.
And then she mentions this report from the New York State Attorney General's office.
Okay.
They found all these problems with health supplement labels in major U.S. retailers.
Really? What kind of problems?
Well, they found ingredients that weren't even listed on the label.
Oh, wow. So you don't even know what you're getting.
And some of those unlisted ingredients were actually harmful.
That's really bad.
It's like you think you're buying something healthy, and it turns out it could be making you sick.
So what can people do to protect themselves?
Well, she really emphasizes understanding the legal definition of health food in Taiwan.
Okay, because I think a lot of people just use that term loosely.
Yeah, they think it means anything that's good for you.
But legally, it's a lot more specific.
Exactly. There's a law called the Health Food Management Act.
Okay.
And it says that for something to be officially called health food, it has to have proven health benefits.
Okay.
Backed by scientific evidence.
So they can't just make up claims.
Right. And it has to be certified by the government.
So it has to go through a whole process.
And they give it a special certification number.
Okay.
Only products that have gone through that whole process can legally advertise specific health benefits.
So if you see a regular food product claiming to, like, cure something.
Yeah, or prevented disease or whatever.
That's actually against the law.
That's why that little green man logo is so important.
It means it's actually certified.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's what to look for.
And she warns people not to be guinea pigs.
So don't just blindly follow trends.
Right, don't just take something because everyone else is.
Especially if you don't know what it is or what it does.
And she's very clear that health foods are still food.
They're not medicine.
And they should never replace actual medical treatment.
So if you have a serious health problem,
you need to see a doctor.
Don't just try to treat yourself with supplements.
Exactly. And she talks about how certain ingredients in these supplements, they can interact with prescription medications in dangerous ways.
Oh, wow.
Like she mentions cranberry and ginkgo.
Okay.
Those can be risky if you're taking blood thinners.
Really?
And St. John's wort. That can mess with anti-rejection drugs.
So people who have had transplants need to be careful.
And then there's ginseng and garlic.
Okay.
Those can cause problems if you're on diabetes medication.
So many things to watch out for.
And she also says that taking certain supplements for a long time,
like those ones that are marketed for liver health or cholesterol, they can actually damage your liver and kidneys.
It's like the opposite of what they're supposed to do.
That's ironic.
Yeah. And she comes back to that high consumption, low knowledge idea. And she calls this behavior modern primitive.
Wow.
Like we're living in this modern world.
Yeah, with all this technology and stuff.
But when it comes to health, we're kind of acting like we're still in the Stone Age.
Just blindly following trends.
And not really understanding what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
And then she goes into how our bodies actually process stuff.
Whether it's food or medicine.
Right. It's all foreign substances to our bodies.
So our bodies have to figure out what to do with them.
Exactly. And there's this process called ADME.
What does that stand for?
Absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion.
Okay, so it's like the whole journey of a substance through your body.
Yeah, she actually uses this analogy of a traffic network.
Okay, I like analogies.
So the traffic network is like your blood circulation.
Uh-huh.
And then there are these public buses.
Which are like
transporters that move stuff around.
Okay.
And then there are banks.
Banks.
Yeah, like plasma proteins and tissues
Okay.
that can bind to substances.
Okay.
And then ATMs.
So like places where substances can be accessed.
Yeah, and released.
Okay.
And then chemical factories.
What are those?
Your liver.
Oh, right. The liver breaks things down.
Yeah, metabolizes stuff.
Okay.
And then finally, garbage trucks.
To take out the trash. Exactly. That's your kidneys filtering stuff out.
Wow, that's a really good analogy.
It really helps to visualize what's happening.
It definitely makes it easier to understand.
And she also talks about the first pass effect.
What's that?
So after something is absorbed in your gut,
Okay.
it goes to your liver first.
Okay.
And the liver can actually metabolize a lot of it right away.
So it kind of filters things before they go into the rest of your body.
Yeah, and sometimes that reduces the effectiveness of a drug.
Oh, wow.
Or it can even create toxic byproducts. But some drugs are actually designed to be activated by this first pass effect.
Oh, interesting. So it's not always a bad thing.
Right. It just depends on the drug.
Okay.
And then she talks about the kidneys and how they get rid of waste.
Yeah, they're like the cleaning crew.
They filter stuff out of your blood and pee it out.
But they could get overloaded.
If you're constantly consuming tons of stuff.
Yeah, especially if your liver's already working overtime.
Right. And she thinks this might be connected to the high rates of kidney failure in Taiwan.
That's a scary thought.
It is. And then she introduces these two terms, pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics.
Those are big words.
I know, but they're important.
Okay, so what do they mean?
Pharmacokinetics is basically what we just talked about.
So how the body handles foreign substances.
Yeah, like absorption, distribution, all that stuff.
Okay.
And then pharmacodynamics is how those substances actually affect the body.
So, like what they do to you.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And she says understanding both of those things
Yeah.
is crucial for figuring out if something should be considered food or medicine.
It's not just about what it's made of.
Right. It's about how your body interacts with it.
Makes sense.
And she explains how different substances are absorbed in your gut.
Okay.
Like some things just diffuse passively.
So they just kind of slip through.
Yeah. And other things need special transporters.
Like little gateways.
Yeah. And then some things dissolve in fats.
Okay.
She uses the example of L-Dopa.
What's that?
It's a medicine for Parkinson's disease. And it actually competes with certain amino acids for the same transporters.
Oh, wow. So what you eat can actually affect how well your medicine works.
Exactly. It's all connected.
That's amazing.
She did some research on this herself.
Oh, really?
She was studying beta-lactam antibiotics and this substance called diphenylglycine.
Also known as camphor acid.
Yeah, and she found that camphor acid actually helps those antibiotics get absorbed.
Like it guides them in?
Yeah, she calls it a guide dog.
I love that.
It uses a specific transporter called PEPT1.
Okay.
And she even got a patent for a way to use camphor acid to improve L-Dopa absorption.
Wow. So she used her research to actually help people.
That's incredible.
It is.
And then she talks about antioxidant supplements.
Okay.
And how she's not so sure they actually work.
Really? Why not?
Well, she explains that the liver, its main job is oxidation.
So like breaking things down.
Right. And antioxidants.
Yeah.
They're the opposite of that. They're reducing agents. So when you take an antioxidant supplement, your liver is probably just going to metabolize it right away.
So it might not even reach the parts of your body where you need it.
Exactly. She uses this analogy of couples driving on a highway.
Okay.
Like the antioxidants are the couples.
Okay.
And the free radicals they're supposed to neutralize are like other cars on the highway.
Okay.
But there's no guarantee that they'll actually find each other.
So you might be taking all these antioxidants.
Yeah.
But they might just be getting processed by your liver before they can do any good.
Exactly. And she brings up the high rate of dialysis in Taiwan again.
Oh, right.
She thinks it might be because people are putting too much strain on their livers and kidneys.
By taking all these supplements.
And maybe also not telling their doctors about all the different things they're taking.
So there could be all these interactions happening.
Yeah, and that can lead to organ damage.
That's scary.
And she says the people who are most vulnerable to this are the elderly and people who aren't as educated about health.
So they might be more likely to just follow trends.
And they might not have access to good information.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And she ends this part with a funny little story.
What is it?
She says one of her criteria for choosing a son-in-law is that his family shouldn't be too reliant on medication or supplements.
Oh, wow. So she's really serious about this.
Yeah, she doesn't want her grandchildren growing up in a household where everyone's popping pills all the time.
That's a good point.
It's about creating a healthy environment.
Both physically and mentally.
All right, now in part 3, she gets into the whole mess of food and drug regulations.
Okay, this is where it gets really complicated.
Yeah, she calls it the blurry lines, food versus medicine and regulatory chaos.
So she's not holding back.
She starts by pointing out how we tend to categorize food and medicine.
Like healthy versus unhealthy.
Yeah, or natural versus artificial.
Or Eastern versus Western.
Right. But she says those are all unscientific ways of thinking about it.
So how should we be thinking about it?
She says we should focus on risk.
Okay.
So if something is safe and it doesn't claim to have any special health benefits, then it's food.
Simple enough.
But if something is safe
and
it does claim to have health benefits, and those claims are backed by scientific evidence, then it's a drug.
Which could be prescription or over-the-counter.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
I think the much more logical way to classify things.
It's not about what we think it is.
Right. It's about what it actually does.
And how safe it is.
Exactly. And she also talks about quality assurance standards.
Like ISO and GMP.
Yeah, she thinks those are really important for making sure products are consistently safe and high quality.
Okay.
And she's critical of how Taiwan has been doing things.
How so?
She says we've had this fragmented approach.
So like different rules for different things.
Yeah, and she thinks that's a big reason why we keep having all of these food safety problems.
So we need a more unified system.
Exactly, and she uses some examples from her own time at the Department of Health to illustrate this.
Oh yeah, what are they?
Well, there was this whole thing about glucosamine.
Okay.
It was like a political nightmare.
Really?
So glucosamine sulfate, there's some evidence that it can help with osteoarthritis pain.
Okay.
But it doesn't actually protect your bones or anything like that. But it was being marketed as if it did.
Oh, wow.
And it was costing the NHI a ton of money.
Because people were getting it prescribed.
Yeah, and there was a lot of pressure to keep it as a prescription drug.
Even though it might not have been that effective.
Right, because if it wasn't a prescription drug,
the NHI wouldn't cover it.
And people would have to pay for it themselves.
So it was about money.
And politics.
Wow.
But she wasn't having it.
What did she do?
She started a reevaluation of glucosamine based on actual scientific evidence.
So like looking at the research.
Yeah, and she decided to reclassify glucosamine and glucosamine hydrochloride as food and glucosamine sulfate as an over-the-counter drug.
So it wasn't a prescription anymore.
And the NHI wouldn't cover it.
Wow, that's a bold move.
It was, but she saw it as a victory for logic and science.
Yeah, sticking to the evidence.
And it saved the NHI a lot of money.
So it was a win-win.
And then there's the story of the Burning Firebird coffee.
What was that?
This coffee was marketed as a health product with all these natural ingredients. But it turned out it had tadalafil in it.
Isn't that a drug?
Yeah, it's used to treat erectile dysfunction.
Oh, wow.
So it was basically a drug disguised as a food.
To get around regulations.
Exactly. And of course, they had to recall it.
I bet.
And she points out that just because something has a food label, it doesn't mean it's actually safe.
Right. There could be stuff in there that's not listed.
Exactly. And she makes this really interesting point about humans eat food versus food eats humans.
What's that about?
She's saying that we should be the ones in control of our food.
So we should be making conscious choices about what we eat.
Yeah, not just blindly consuming whatever's put in front of us.
I like that.
It's about being mindful.
And taking responsibility.
And she criticizes the government for focusing too much on the product instead of the person.
So like they're more concerned with regulations and stuff?
Yeah, instead of actually thinking about how these things affect people.
Right.
And then she talks about GMP.
Good manufacturing practice.
Right, and how the standards for food are way less strict than for pharmaceuticals.
Really?
Yeah, like food GMP was voluntary for a long time.
So companies didn't have to do it.
And even if they did get certified, there wasn't really a guarantee that their products were good. There were cases of companies lying about their certification.
Oh, wow.
And the penalties for violating food GMP were really weak.
So there wasn't much incentive to actually follow the rules.
Exactly. And eventually they got rid of the food GMP logo and replaced it with TQF.
Taiwan quality food.
Right, but she's still skeptical.
She doesn't think.